Yeah, great. Thanks, Janice, and thanks for all of your leadership through the years over this and teaching us. I'm going to let Nicole take away the presentation right now, and then I'll be around if there's questions to answer later on. So Nicole, over to you.
All right. Just hoping my screen is showing. Okay, so my name is Nicole Carpenter. I'm the Phragmites project coordinator at Georgian Bay Forever, and today I'm going to talk to you about our success as a charity working with community groups, citizens, and municipalities to manage and eradicate Phragmites along the coasts of eastern Georgian Bay. So Georgian Bay Forever is a charity dedicated to scientific research and public education on Georgian Bay's aquatic ecosystem. Our mission is to protect, enhance, and restore the aquatic ecosystems of Georgian Bay by taking action and funding accredited research on water levels, water quality, and ecosystems. This presentation will highlight the methods, progress, and success that we've had in our community-based invasive Phragmites management on the coast. And in addition, I'll talk about some challenges or impediments we have faced going forward. So we've been working with Phragmites on Georgian Bay for the last 9 years, and we have seen significant changes in this time. Our work began in 2013, and we applied for funding to begin our efforts against Phragmites in Georgian Bay. Following a community stakeholder meeting with the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, we coordinated a community action plan for the West Collingwood shoreline. Within a following year or two, NVCA received a grant of $29,000 from Environment and Climate Change Canada's Lake Simcoe Southeastern Georgian Bay Cleanup Fund, and we received a grant from the RBC Blue Water Project to assist the community with Phragmites monitor, control, and education. By 2016, we had substantially grown our area in which we were training and educating communities across Georgian Bay and cutting Phragmites in Tay, Georgian Bay Township, and the Township of the Archipelago. Over this time, we had really come to realize the need for increased efforts along Georgian Bay to get rid of Phragmites. So back in 2013, when we had originally applied for some funding, we had also started cutting in Honey Harbor, which is in Georgian Bay Township. And we really were able to build our community with the cottage associations in this area. So this map here shows the current status of Phragmites in Georgian Bay Township around Honey Harbor, Cognasheen, and Macy's Bay. And I will be showing a few maps, so just so you can get your bearings. North is at the top of the map and south is at the bottom. And the different colors of points represent the different status of sites in Georgian Bay. So blue represents native Phragmites that we've spotted. Yellow represents sites that were cut by staff, volunteers, or cottagers in the area. Green represents sites that are in that monitoring / eradicated stage. And red is sites that have been left untreated. So as we know, using the cut to drown method sometimes only takes a year or two before you see zero regrowth, but we do need to continue checking it for maybe 6 or 7 years to ensure that a site is completely eradicated. And this is something that we have started leaving to community members to start and cottagers to check, the sites near their cottage and whatnot to make sure there's no regrowth. So this past season, we actually saw a 2-foot drop in water levels, and a lot of sites that we had originally seen zero regrowth at, we saw them pop back up this year, but they would just be a few stalks, and a cottager or our staff could go out and quickly cut them. So this is all part of our 5-year management plan. So in 2019, Georgian Bay Forever developed a 5-year community-based Phragmites eradication plan for the original stands identified along Tay Township, Township of Georgian Bay, and the Township of the Archipelago. Last year, my colleague presented at this conference, and she discussed some of the key components of this plan, which I won't go into too much detail today, but 2 of our key components to success are developing a thorough plan and collaborating with volunteers, municipalities, community groups, and building funding opportunities around Georgian Bay. At the end of the 5-year community plan, the goal is to confidently leave the responsibility to communities by training citizens over the years about Phragmites. So individuals learn how to remove Phragmites, how to identify it if new stands are to pop up, and how to monitor following the proper protocols. In 2019, we started with 588 stands that were identified, and only 7% of them were in that monitoring stage. And by 2020, we had increased our area and our number of stands identified to 711 under management, and we were exploring new areas, finding new sites, and we were fortunately able to increase the percentage that we were in that monitoring stage. So in 2019, we had a tremendous amount of community support. We had 23 community cuts that we hosted with over 100 volunteers attending and dedicating 1,061 volunteer hours. Unfortunately, in 2020 and 2021, our numbers were not this high due to COVID. We had to reduce our community events, but we were still able to host them. Luckily, Phragmites work is done outside, and we could just have smaller groups. This past season, so where we're currently at, is managing 904 stands. We've recently gone into Match Bay, which is a provincially significant. So this increased our number of stands, but we are still at an increase amount, 45% of sites in that monitoring stage. So we're increasing our number of stands that we're managing, and this does pose a challenge to our 5-year plan. Phragmites knows no boundaries, and until we eradicate it all, both in the water and on land, it will have the ability to spread and establish. In 2019, this map on the right would have been all red, so all sites untreated, but we're seeing plenty of control in the township of Georgian Bay and north, and this is allowing us to relocate our efforts further south. I'll now briefly touch on some of the challenges we've faced as an organization. So part of protecting management investments made is implementing and improving road management by all stakeholders. Georgian Bay Forever and its partners have made many efforts on increasing MTO participation. For those of you that don't know, the Township of the Archipelago is a municipality that recognizes the threat of Phragmites and are dedicated to controlling it in their township. So the municipality, along with Marine Patrol, Ontario Parks, and community groups in this area, have been working very hard for many years and are at 80% eradication on their coastline. In early 2021, we hosted a webinar with the Township of the Archipelago and Dr. Janice Gilbert for municipalities and First Nations in the Georgian Bay area. Out of the 82 municipalities in our area, 54 attended, 4 First Nations, and 8 other organizations had also attended. Poll results from our webinar showed that only 40% of the municipalities had 40% of municipalities and First Nations road departments had a road management plan put in place. In our webinar, we provided suggested resolutions for municipalities to help improve their management actions of Phragmites, and the Township of the Archipelago sent these resolutions to each municipality in Ontario. Suggestions included things like implementing the best management protocols, requesting that the MTO conduct mapping and treatment, and sending in requests to all levels of government to provide further funding support for these actions. This does well for spreading awareness, but it's unknown which municipalities passed these resolutions or even read them. So organizations like ours don't always have the resources to follow up on extensive and effective road management in all municipalities in the area. So is this maybe something that the working group could take on with local municipalities, or is there capacity within new proposed structures that make it funded? On behalf of our organization, I would just like to put out some questions or discussion topics that we and a lot of our community members that we work with are curious about. While MTO is treating some highways, which is to be applauded, it's been impossible to get information as to whether they map all the highways in the region, what the scope of the problem is, how much are they treating, and how well is their treatment working. In addition, we have talked a little bit about this new aquatic herbicide, and we're just curious if anyone's used it, how well it's working, and maybe this is something that MTO and municipalities could start incorporating into a Phragmites management plan. These are all important questions to be asked and discussed across the province in order to take efficient action. So I'd just like to thank everyone for listening today, and thank the working group for having me here to speak, and as well as all of our funders for providing the support over the past 9 years. It's taken time overcoming barriers and building relationships in the community to get to where we are now. But as we know, Phragmites is a collaborative effort, and it's important that we have conferences like these to share knowledge and be able to learn from one another. And now, if anyone has any questions, feel free to direct them to myself. Here's my email and phone number if anyone wants to contact me after the presentation. And then David is here with me as well and can help answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Nicole and David, for all your efforts and work. It's a great presentation. I love the maps. I love all the the dots that have gone from red to blue. It's so encouraging to see that. And as you rightly pointed out, if your organization hadn't done anything, likely most of those would have remained red. So thank you. For Nicole, this is from Michael McTavish. Do you know what the general status is of those native Phragmite populations? For example, are they small, isolated patches or more substantial? And how's it interacting with invasive Phragmites?
Yeah, so majority of what we're seeing are small patches of the native Phragmites, and usually it's either right beside or it's intermingling with the invasive. And we have kept record over the last few years, and we've seen the loss of the native Phragmites. So part of it, we keep our data is collected by students every year, and there's definitely some misidentification that has happened, but only because some stands are so difficult, or when you have the native and invasive growing together, it can be really tough to find. But this year, I didn't go much into my presentation, but we were in Matchedash Bay, which is a provincially significant wetland, and we had a ton of these sites where we didn't know it looked native, but it was growing like an invasive. It was growing tall and dense. And anyway, I sent in some samples to Doug Wendell at Oakland University, and he did some testing for us. And it turns out that there's 2 tributaries that flow into Matchedash Bay, and they're all native Phragmites. So the whole, these 2 rivers are just full of it. I think a third of the stands, so this was about 20 to 30 different sites, but they're all large, were all native Phragmites. And this is at least my first experience seeing that much native Phragmites growing somewhere. And then I just saw someone ask a question about hybridization. And Janice, you might know more information, but we sent these samples to the Wendell lab at Oakland University because they have the ability to detect hybrids, and I believe they've detected them down in the States. And we thought these ones that we were seeing were maybe hybrids in Matchedash Bay, but they were not. So at least in Georgian Bay and around it, we don't have any evidence, and I don't think there's any evidence in Ontario for hybridization yet.
Yeah, I believe Karen Alexander is going to be talking about a really neat project coming up under the Green Shovels Initiative to help kind of answer some of these questions, whether it's native, invasive, or hybrid as well. So there are, I know, a number of areas where it's the same example you described, particularly in Northern Ontario, where you got intermixed. It's really hard to sort it out. David, would you like to answer the next question there on the screen? Can you read it, or would you like me to read it for you?
Yeah, could you read it to me, Janice?
Sure, absolutely. So it's from John Foster. It's how closely with the Georgian Bay Islands National Park do you work?
We are coordinating all the time, and I know Prabir is on the meeting today, whose paper, I guess, when he first wrote it on Phragmites was what kind of caught my attention in Georgian Bay. But we're not able to work on the park property, and there is a lot of Phragmites that's kind of adjacent to work sites that we're working on. So the strategy at the park has evolved, and I won't speak specifically to it. Prabir would be able to speak perfectly to that. But what we've done is kind of just roll up our sleeves immediately and start to eradicate. And I think there were some constraints to the national park against doing that. And what we see now is the threat of a spread vector from the park, because there's, miles of Phragmites basically on the southeast shore of Georgian Bay National Park's major island, Beausoleil Island. And the concern there is that that's a seed bank that's just going to keep spreading into our community, which is directly adjacent by water and wind to that stand. So we are aware and actually helped the park write a grant application a couple of years ago. So they have some significant resources that they're starting to put towards controlling Phragmites now. But it's we'll work as closely with the park as we possibly can, and we're looking this summer to see if we can do some joint cuts together on some of those park islands that are adjacent to areas that we're working on. I think our approach was, this is going to be a major issue, and the earlier we can get at it, the better. And because we were dealing with a lot of private property and also had a letter from the minister in Ontario allowing us to do this control, we could directly get to cutting immediately. And there were some, more constraints when you're working in a national park that they had to address before they could just get to the cutting.